Okay, so let's talk some content. First, before I get into this conversation about multiple sources, we should have Laura Mulligan from University Libraries visiting today. And I don't know where exactly she'll fit in her 20 to 30 minutes. But Laura, thanks for coming in today. And I always appreciate you visiting and sharing some of the resources available in our library system. And for those of you that in class, um, if Laura's already presented, then I would just add this as a follow-up to her presentation. But otherwise, if she hasn't presented, this will be precursor to her presentation. You should take note, pay attention to some of the resources that are available in our library system. Again, this is an information gathering course, and there is an abundance of information next door across the street. And a lot of that information you pay for with your student fees. So you should be invested in what they have over there and how that might be of use to you. So again, do pay attention to that. And along those lines, you will have one of your first assignments, a Bracken Library scavenger hunt of sorts, trying to find information available through our university library system. That won't be due until next Tuesday, so that would be October 6th, I believe. And again, once I've changed the date in Blackboard, you'll be able to see that, but for now, it's not visible to you. So, into the online content and the material that I have here. The first lesson that I usually give on day one is that you need to have multiple sources of information to corroborate whatever it is, whatever factoid it is that you're trying to dispense into the public domain. Because again, as I said in the other video, you're not going to have a problem finding information. That's not the issue. The issue is, are you sending information into the public space that is credible, that is accurate? Because if it's not, then you're going to potentially find yourself in a world of hurt. Now, this was something that I pulled just to speak to all of you. You are a millennial. But even within your own demographic, 7 out of 10 said, at least in this survey, now, again, I don't know, 500 millennials hardly represents the entire demographic in this country, but be that as it may, 7 out of 10 out of those who participated in this study said that they would rather be last to know the news than to receive inaccurate information. They want to be last. They're okay with that. And, I don't know where this comes from, this timeliness, issue that we have to be first to break the news. I mean, to that end, I might say that, okay, when we had that shooting in Lafayette, Louisiana, I mean, that's the last major one that I know of. Actually, that's not true. More recent than that was the guy that shot the journalist and her videographer. I think that was over in Virginia. And so, I mean, take that one, take the Lafayette movie theater shooting, take the Aurora, Colorado theater shooting from back in 2012. Do you remember in any of those instances which media outlet first broke that story? I'll pause here for a minute so you can actually think about it. Who was it? Who was it that first broke that news story? Can you remember that? What about going back to, some more major events? Hurricane Katrina was just over 10 years ago. Who was the first one on the scene in the aftermath of the Hurricane Katrina disaster? What about 9/11? Do we remember which media outlet first broadcast, publicized that event? I mean, I don't know, except for bragging rights within the industry, I don't understand where this is coming from. But there is this desire, this need to be the first to break news. But that comes with a risk. You may not always have it correct. And, if this study is any indication of the population at large, people are willing to wait. I'm not sure how long they're willing to wait, but they're willing to wait a little bit longer in order to get correct, accurate information. So how do you do that? Well, you do it by corroborating the information you receive with other source materials. I mean, just to continue on, I paused on this so you probably had a chance to read this already. 2 out of 3 of people in your own demographic aren't confident that the news that they're getting is accurate. You are soon to become those professionals. So, what are you going to do? What's going to develop in your work ethic to ensure that the information that you dispense into the public sphere is in fact correct? that's kind of important. So I put that out there, and I mean, just to give you an idea that it's not even just the pros. I mean, I'm going to show you some examples of the pros where they got it wrong. I mean, student media, some of you probably involved with that, you're not immune to the repercussions of faulty information. And I pull this example. It's a couple years old, but it's a damn good one, and I think that's why I want to use it. Joe Paterno died in well, he did actually die in January 2012. But the problem was that he had a couple of earlier incidents that led people to think that this guy died. And if you don't know who Joe Paterno is, the man coached football at Penn State. Kind of coincidental that that's where I'm at right now when we talk about this, but he coached at Penn State, I think, since the late 1950s, early 1960s. I mean, it was seriously half a century. The man was a legend. Unfortunately, his legend became a bit tarnished because of the scandal, the child abuse scandal, not from him, but from one of his former coaches. But nevertheless, I digress on that. The fact is that this was a very popular, prominent figure in this community, and the Penn State Student News website first had reported his death at 8:45 p.m., and it was based off of an email that was sent to football players. And so here's the tweet. Again, information that goes online, it never completely goes away. You can always find it on the deep web. And so what happened was, of course, their website crashed. People were, there was way too much action on it, way too much traffic, and so it got too hot and it crashed. So what happened was a local radio station picked it up, and they went out with it. And as I scroll down here, you'll see that other media outlets picked up on this too. So CBS Sports, now we're talking national outlets. They published an entire obituary saying that Paterno had died, and it was seemingly based on that student media report. Here's Huffington Post, and then, of course, what we found out was that Joe Paterno didn't actually die. It was a false alarm, and so then all these other media outlets said, well, we're not going to fall on the sword for this. We're going to go back, to the student media tweet based off of one email, because, nothing is ever incorrectly reported in an email, ever. But they did. They kind of threw the onus back onto the student media site. But here's screenshots of what, they had falsely reported. And it's because nobody was doing any fact checking. They just saw it and said, oh, shit, we better run with this. Well, this is where, again, you play with fire, and sometimes you get burned, and they did. And so, again, this is one instance where I believe it was the New York Times, New York Times reporter Mark Vieira appeared to be among the first who actually, go figure, talked with a Paterno family spokesperson. And look at what time this was. The original tweet went out at 8:45 p.m. This is 13 minutes later. 13 minutes later. So student media site crashes. All these other national outlets pick up on, the story and run with it. And then 13 minutes later, someone from the New York Times says, guys, what the hell are you talking about? He's still alive. So then what happened, well, I thought it said on here, might be on this one. Let's see here. I remember that it was the editor of the student media site that had to resign. And I'm trying to find that. I can't remember if it's on this one. Oh, here we go. Yep, there it was. Had to step down. And I think, well, I'll have to try to find this again, but the point was that it wasn't even a full hour after all this. Oh, here we go. Just before midnight that night, there was an apology from the managing editor. Okay, so yeah, within an hour, all this had been proven to be false, and then that was about 9 o'clock at night. By midnight, the managing editor had stepped down, saying that someone had to take responsibility for it, and he or she, I can't remember if it was a guy or a gal, but they said that they would. So, you get the idea. And then, I put this in here. All these links that I'm showing you are in Blackboard. In fact, I go back to the site. It's in this folder, and so if you click on this, this is all accessible to you. So you could be following along with me right now or just paying attention to the screen. That's fine. It should be available to you. There it is. And here's some examples. Don't be lazy. Here was an example where CNN had to fire one of its editors for plagiarism in 50 stories. I mean, where is the professionalism in that? Here was another example. Now, it's not Forbes. Forbes is just reporting on CNN, getting the story of the Newtown shooting incorrect. And I'm not, in the interest of time, I'm going to just summarize this for you. But basically, what they did, we got word that someone had gone to an elementary school and shot up a bunch of 5 and 6-year-old kids. I don't know what the hell you could have against 5 or 6-year-old kids, but that's what happened. And so CNN, they got the wrong suspect. They got the brother. Instead of what we now know to be Adam Lanza, they went after his brother, Ryan Lanza. So can you imagine what a shitty day this guy has? He's at work and he's getting phone calls left and right from media outlets asking why he, suddenly went off the deep end and why he went into a school and shot up all these kids. And he doesn't know what the hell's going on. Meanwhile, he finds out that not only did his brother, I believe it was his younger brother, Adam Lanza, commit that atrocity, but they also shot and killed their mother. So how shitty of a day is that? You go to work and you get blamed for a mass shooting that you had no connection to whatsoever except the fact that it was your brother, and you lost your mom. So, yeah, pretty lousy day there. Thank you, CNN, for that. It's not just CNN, though. It's NPR. This was a couple years ago. This was when Gabby Giffords was shot at a grocery store outside of Tucson, Arizona. And NPR got a tip, got information saying, that Congresswoman, she's since retired, but she's still alive, and she's now an advocate for gun control legislation. But at the time when she was shot through the head, in that tragedy, they labeled her as dead, and she didn't die. So I pick examples that are usually credible. CNN, NPR, these are reputable, credible media sites that most people probably would trust, and they still got it wrong. And a lot of it's because they acted too quickly. Here's a good example that shows you some numbers, some basic statistics. So I will summarize this to close out this video. But the bottom line here, folks, is that you got to start fact-checking your shit. You got to know what you're sending out into the public domain, and you got to make sure, double and triple check, to make sure that what you're sending is in fact credible. Because if it's not, it only takes one time, and you could find yourself, your head on a chopping block. So this was an instance where the Justice Department basically had an invoice with expenses for muffins that apparently cost $16 a pop. People got a hold of this in the news media, and they said, what the hell is this? Why are our taxpayers going toward $16 muffins? What's going on here? And so of course, the politicians' heads to roll and all this stuff. Nobody really was investigating, though, the actual invoice from the hotel. And what we found out was that actually, let's see here, where is that? It actually wasn't $16 a muffin. What it was $16 for a buffet-style breakfast. Continental breakfast is what it was. And so Hilton, offered that explanation when someone finally called. And so there was a reporter that went into LexisNexis Academic and started looking at news stories. And what they found is that there were 223 stories that mentioned $16 muffins, $16 per muffin, and so forth. Of those, 178 reported the issue critically. So they were saying, what's up with the Justice Department? Why are you wasting our taxpayer dollars, you idiots? And they didn't mention the Hilton Hotel response because probably they never bothered to call and ask, why was this so expensive? So when you do some quick math, 178 that falsely reported that information, or it wasn't even so much that it was falsely reported, it was incomplete and inaccurate as a result, that's 79%, 178 out of 223. So that means 4 out of every 5 news stories in this 8-day window when this muffin gate occurred. I love how we throw gate onto every scandal, but 4 out of 5 were incorrectly reported. What the hell is with that? That's unprofessional. So that would be my important lesson to you moving forward beyond the first day, is that you need to be consulting multiple sources, and hopefully I've made a convincing argument for you as to why.